What is subjective Hippocratic utility and what is objective Hippocratic utility, and why does the distinction matter here? Um, we are continuing our discussion of the principles of normative principles for ethics. And so we're still up in this, I think of it as the left-hand box in the individual side. It's in the middle, of course, where we've noticed we've got this box called Hippocratic utility, but we've got subjective and objective sides to it. Okay, so I think of subjective as maybe a good way to think about it as what's inside what's inside your head, your ideas. You are a subject. That's a kind of a technical term, and so the things that you have are particular to you, your values, your opinions, your likes, your dislikes. Those are all subjective. That doesn't mean that they're wrong, that they don't exist, that they're not real. It just means that they come from you. And so if somebody has a different view about what makes good ice cream, we say that's just subjective. Again, we don't mean it's made up, it's real. I really do like that vanilla ice cream. You really do like chocolate, but it can be different because it's coming from us. It happens to be one of our likes. If I have an opinion about a football team, you can have a different one. Something that's objective, that's outside. Okay, so I get my hands on it. It's outside here. It's not in here, but it's out there. Okay, so those things are usually considered to be true for everybody. Let's share my screen again with this feature. So subjective based on the subject, objective, true regardless of who is making it, not based on any subject. So my example for an objective thing would be the length of a wall. A wall, at least as we think about it, has a certain length. You measure it. It doesn't, it's true for everybody, it doesn't differ for people. It's that sort of a thing. Of course, what about good treatment for a patient? Is that subjective or objective? Well, we'll come back in just a minute. Subjective Hippocratic utility defined. That would be care based completely on the perspective of the physician. It would make it subjective because it's coming from the physician. Now we have to talk a little bit about this because isn't that why we go to a physician? Shouldn't it be coming from the physician? Well, it's important to see here. You may not have noticed it. You may not take this too seriously, but subjective Hippocratic utility is required by the Hippocratic Oath. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and share another screen. I'm going to share the Hippocratic Oath with you. No, I'm not. Let's try that again. There it is. Okay, so look down in the third paragraph here, and the Hippocratic Oath says, I will use treatment to help the sick according to my ability and judgment. So that's a little phrase. It may not seem to matter to you, but we'll take that rather seriously. That's creating an obligation, a moral obligation for the physician to use their ability and their judgment as the basis for their assessments about what should be done for somebody's care. This doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound the way we do things now. It doesn't sound like this is fair, okay? And that's all true, but nonetheless, it's still required by the Hippocratic Oath. Now you could, let me go back to the other screen for a minute. You could argue, well, okay, maybe that's just not so bad after all. Maybe all assessments and suggestions are going to be subjective. And I guess maybe you could feel that way. We're talking about things like good, and isn't that just in the eyes of the beholder? Well, we don't tend to think that when we come to medicine. We tend to think that there are at least some objective standards or touch points that should factor into when we're deciding care. It shouldn't completely be up to what the physician just happens to think. And we have a problem if we have a code of ethics that seems to be requiring something opposite. So let me slide down here and talk about, on the other hand, you might argue that, well, could you really make a completely objective assessment? And again, with good care, there may be a range. I happen to think that there's a range of care, as long as we're in the range. So we're going to define objective here, not as being true for everybody in some sort of absolute sense, but just as care as assessments that neutralize biases and special perspectives. So there's some examples of things on the screen for you to think about. Okay, so objective hippocratic utility as a definition would be the benefit and protect the patient according to standards that are objective. In that sense, eliminate or neutralize bias rather than based on the physician's personal judgments. So it's important to see that the more we advocate for objective assessments, the more we want those assessments to be objective, to take into account colleagues, medical practice, medical research, what's considered good care, and of course to take into consideration the patient's own choices, because after all, their care should be their choice. The less we are advocating for a Hippocratic view of medicine. And in fact, a Hippocratic view of medicine, at least if we understand it, as mentioned in the oath, might simply be impossible.